A single piece of paper hidden away for decades holds the key to one of Hollywood's darkest family secrets. On it are two simple words that legally erased a son from his father's life at the moment of his birth. The document is a birth certificate and the words, "A father declined." For years, the world never knew why the legendary Clint Eastwood would commit such a brutal act. But now the full story can finally be told. The story begins in the late 1970s and 80s, a time when Clint Eastwood was on top of the world. He was a global superstar, a symbol of tough American masculinity, and he had a famous partner by his side, the actress Sandra Lockach. They lived together for 14 years, and to the public, they were a Hollywood power couple. Sandra believed their relationship was real and exclusive. She later wrote that Clint even made up a song for her called "She Made Me Monogamous," but Sandra was living a lie. While she was at home, Clint was living a completely separate secret life. During his relationship with Sandra, Clint met a flight attendant named Jaseline Reeves. Their affair was not a brief fling. It was a serious hidden relationship that produced 2 children. The first was a son, Scott, born on March 21, 1986. 2 years later, a daughter, Catherine, was born in 1988. Clint was still living with Sandra Lockach when both of his children with Jaseline were born. This was a secret he was determined to keep. To protect his public image and his relationship with Sandra, Clint made a decision that would shape his son's entire life. When Scott was born, his birth certificate was filled out with the words, "Father declined." Legally, Scott Clinton Reeves had no father. He was not an Eastwood. Clint did the same for his daughter, Catherine. It was a clean break, a legal wall built to keep his secret family completely separate from his real life. Sandra Lockach would not find out about this double life for years. And when she did, the discovery would lead to one of the most toxic and brutal breakups in Hollywood history. To keep the secret safe, Jaseline raised Scott and Catherine far from the flashing lights of Hollywood. They grew up thousands of miles away on the big island of Hawaii. Scott's childhood was the opposite of a Hollywood upbringing. He lived a simple outdoor life. He spent his days fishing, surfing, and diving in the ocean. His family lived on a 30-acre ranch surrounded by rolling green hills and cattle. He would go four-wheeling down to empty beaches, have bonfires at night, and camp in the back of a pickup truck. He was not Scott Eastwood, son of a movie star. He was Scott Reeves, a regular kid who didn't live around any famous people. In fact, at his middle school in Hawaii, he was known for being a white boy, which made him a minority. It was a tough experience that had nothing to do with who his father was. This was exactly what Clint wanted. His son was a secret, hidden away where no one could find him, but a secret that can't stay hidden forever. And when the boy with no name finally came to California, he didn't find a father's warm embrace. He found a drill sergeant. When Scott was in high school, he made a life-changing decision. He moved from the quiet life in Hawaii to live with the father who had never publicly claimed him. This was when his real relationship with Clint Eastwood began, and it was nothing like he could have imagined. There were no apologies for the lost years, no gifts to make up for his absence. Instead, Clint began a tough, relentless program to see what his son was made of. Clint's parenting style was described by everyone who knew him as old school, strict, and demanding. His daughter, Francesca, confirmed that both of her parents were very strict with her when she was a kid. For Scott, this meant there would be no handouts. Clint was a multimillionaire, but he was determined that his son would never get a free ride. Scott learned this lesson the hard way. He once called his dad to ask for a loan. He needed $8,000 to buy a truck for a job he was working. He promised to pay his father back every month. Scott remembered that after he asked, the phone went completely silent. Then Clint simply said, "Yeah, no, that was it." Scott had to figure it out on his own. Clint was teaching him what he called a hustler mentality. The lessons were not just about money. They were about discipline and responsibility, and sometimes they were physical. The most shocking story from Scott's teenage years happened when he was 16 years old. He had taken his younger sister, Catherine, who was 14 at the time, to a party. At some point in the night, Scott left the party and left his sister there. He said he didn't think about it at the time. When Clint found out, he was furious. Scott said his father grabbed him and punched him square in the face. He then told his son, "You don't ever leave your sister at a party, ever." It was a brutal physical lesson that Scott never forgot. He called it very old school of him. Clint wasn't trying to be his son's friend. He was trying to forge his character. His advice was never about fame or Hollywood. It was about being a man of integrity. He told Scott, "Whatever you do, just do it well. Be humble about what you do. Be a good guy and tell the truth." He demanded that his son be on time. Show up and work hard. It was a trial by fire. Clint had legally disowned his son at birth, and now he was emotionally and financially keeping him at a distance. He was forcing Scott to build an identity from scratch as if he had no famous father at all. But was this brutal treatment of Scott a one-time thing designed for the son he barely knew? Or was it part of a dark lifelong pattern of secrets and control? Long before Scott was born, there was another secret daughter. Her name is Laurie Murray, and she was born in 1954. Clint had a brief affair with a woman in Seattle while he was engaged to his first wife, Maggie Johnson. The woman never told Clint she was pregnant. She gave the baby girl up for adoption. And for 30 years, Clint had no idea she existed. In her 30s, Laurie searched for her biological parents and discovered her father was the famous Clint Eastwood. When she reached out, he quietly and privately welcomed her into the family. Then there was the first hidden family. During his 30-year marriage to Maggie Johnson, Clint began a 14-year affair with a stunt woman named Roxanne Tunis. They met on the set of the TV show Rawhide in 1959. This long affair produced a daughter named Kimber, born in 1964. For 25 years, Kimber's existence was a secret, hidden from the public until a tabloid revealed the story in 1989. Kimber later said that when the news broke, her father was furious. She claimed he was so angry that he temporarily disowned her and her son, cutting them off completely. But the most revealing story is the toxic war Clint waged against Sandra Lockach, the woman he was living with when Scott was born. Their 14-year relationship ended in a way that showed the world just how ruthless Clint could be when he felt his control was threatened. Sandra later claimed that early in their relationship, Clint pressured her to have 2 abortions because he was adamant that he did not want to have children with her. She also had a procedure to ensure she could not get pregnant again, a decision she said was made because of his wishes. Their breakup in 1989 was famously brutal. While Sandra was away directing a movie, Clint had the locks on their shared home changed and had all of her belongings packed up and put into storage. She was locked out of the life they had built together. This led to a massive lawsuit. Sandra sued him for palimony, accusing him of emotional distress and abuse. To make the lawsuit go away, they settled. Part of that deal was a promise from Clint. He would get her a $1.5 million directing deal at Warner Brothers' studio. It seemed like a victory for Sandra, but it was a trap, and every single one was rejected. She couldn't understand why. Then she made a shocking discovery. The $1.5 million deal wasn't real. The money was secretly coming from Clint himself. He had paid the studio to give her a fake contract. In 1995, she sued him again, this time for fraud. She claimed the entire deal was a sham designed to destroy her career and keep her from working in Hollywood ever again. The case went to trial, and just before the jury was about to deliver a verdict that was expected to be in her favor, Clint settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. This pattern of behavior reveals everything. Clint Eastwood is a man who demands absolute control, especially over his family and his public image. The messy public and expensive war with Sandra Lockach showed him what could happen when he lost that control. He was still living with Sandra when Scott and Catherine were born in secret. The brutal legal battle with her likely reinforced his decision to keep his other family completely off the record. By putting "father declined" on Scott's birth certificate, he was building a legal fortress. It was a calculated move to prevent another woman from having any claim on him, his money, or his life. The disownment was not about a lack of love. It was a strategic move in a long game of secrets and power. Clint had built a fortress to protect his career and his image. So what happened when his secret son tried to enter that same career? Clint's old-school philosophy didn't end at home. It followed Scott directly into his professional life. If Scott thought that his father would open doors for him in Hollywood, he was wrong. Clint made it clear that the Eastwood name was not a gift. It was something that had to be earned through struggle and rejection. When Scott first decided to become an actor, he didn't use his famous last name. He started his career as Scott Reeves, his mother's name. He wanted to prove that he could make it on his own without his father's help. It was a good thing he did because his father offered almost no help at all. Scott auditioned for nearly every movie his father directed, and nearly every time he was rejected. He tried out for a major role in his father's Oscar-nominated film American Sniper. But he never got a call back. While his father was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, Scott was struggling to make ends meet. To support himself, he worked a series of normal jobs. He parked cars, worked construction, and was a bartender. He even said that he often made more money pouring drinks than he did from the small acting jobs he managed to get. The constant rejection and struggle took a toll. At one point, he was so tired of Hollywood that he seriously considered quitting acting to become a firefighter. Finally, Clint did give him a role in one of his films. It was a small part in the 2008 movie Gran Torino, but even this came with a lesson in humility. Scott was paid the absolute minimum amount allowed by the Actors Union for the part. The role itself seemed to be a direct reflection of Clint's tough love philosophy. In the movie, Scott's character is constantly insulted by Clint's character, Walt Kowalski. Walt calls him a spoiled little brat. Scott later revealed that many of these harsh insults were not even in the script. His father improvised them on the spot during filming. It was as if Clint was using the movie to send a public message to his son. He was testing him, humiliating him on set to see if he had the toughness to take it. Even after Scott became a successful actor in his own right, starring in big movies like Suicide Squad and the Fast and Furious franchise, his father's advice remained brutally practical. When the studio offered Scott a deal for 3 more Suicide Squad movies, he called his dad for advice. The problem was the studio didn't want to pay him much for the next films. Clint's advice was simple and cold. He told his son, if it feels like they really need you, and if it's a good part, then do it. If not, then don't. There was no encouragement, just a bottom-line calculation. Scott ended up turning the deal down. From the very beginning, Clint made sure his son understood that in his world, nothing would be given. Everything had to be fought for. Clint Eastwood had done everything to break his son. He denied him his name, his money, and his approval. But what he didn't realize was that he wasn't breaking him. He was building him. The years of struggle, rejection, and tough love had a powerful effect on Scott Eastwood. Instead of becoming bitter or broken, he became the exact kind of man his father respected. The harsh lessons forged a deep sense of resilience and humility in him, creating a man who was grounded in the real world, not the fantasy land of Hollywood. Scott lives by the code his father drilled into him. He recently described the family motto, saying, "You don't complain, you don't whine, you just do." This resilience was hardened by more than just his father's tests. Scott has faced deep personal tragedy. In 2014, his girlfriend at the time, Jewel Brangman, was killed in a car accident. Scott said it was the first time he had lost someone he was truly intimate with, and the pain from that loss made it harder for him to open up and date for years. He also found ways to stay grounded outside of the film industry. His close friend, the late actor Paul Walker, introduced him to the martial art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Scott fell in love with the sport and trained seriously. He calls it the ultimate humbling experience because on the mat your ego means nothing. It doesn't matter who you are or who your father is. He said it's a simple honest reality check that reminds you that you're not special. This mindset combined with his love for the outdoors that started in his childhood kept him connected to the simple life he knew in Hawaii. He still loves to surf, fish, and spend time on his father's rural ranch. Far from the noise of Hollywood. Through all the hardship, Scott never lost respect for his father. He still calls Clint his hero and says he couldn't be more proud of him or more inspired by the films he makes. He hopes to one day follow in his father's footsteps and become a director himself. The difficult journey they took together from legal disownment to a life of tough lessons eventually led to a place of understanding. Today they don't have a typical warm father-son relationship. Instead they have what Scott describes as something real, a quiet understanding between them that was built on time, effort, and forgiveness. Clint Eastwood set out on a high-stakes gamble by taking away his son's name and forcing him to fight for everything he risked losing him forever. But the gamble paid off. He created a self-made man who embodied all the old-school values he held dear. The son had to become his own man before he could finally be accepted as an Eastwood. Clint Eastwood is now 94 years old. He is a man who fiercely protects his privacy and is known to shut down any interview that gets too personal about his family. He will likely never sit down and explain in his own words why he put "father declined" on his son's birth certificate. But he doesn't have to. The answer is not in a quote. It is in the story of their lives. The unspoken admission is that he disowned his son to see if he had the strength to one day claim his own legacy. It was the ultimate, most brutal test of character. And the fact that Scott Eastwood is now a successful, humble, and resilient man is the only admission that ever mattered.